You will remain by the ferns, Elara, and you will not speak unless spoken to, which, God willing, you will not be. My stepmother, Lady Anya, adjusted a stray lock of my hair with a dismissive flick of her fingers, her touch as cold and brief as a winter fly. Her own gown, a confection of sapphire silk, shimmered under the chandeliers, a stark contrast to the dove-gray mousseline she had deemed appropriate for me, the color of invisibility, the color of a forgotten corner. My father, Lord Valerius, stood nearby, his gaze fixed on a distant tapestry depicting a forgotten battle. He had mastered the art of being present in a room while his spirit was miles away, a skill he deployed whenever Anya's casual cruelty surfaced. He would not meet my eyes. He never did in these moments. It was easier to pretend I did not exist than to defend my existence. My stepsisters, Isabella and Celeste, were the true stars of the evening, their laughter like the chime of crystal glasses. Isabella, with her flame-colored hair and emerald eyes, was a recognized beauty. Celeste, a younger, softer version, was all honeyed curls and shy smiles. They were not unkind, not in the active, deliberate way their mother was. They were simply planets orbiting a brighter sun, and I was a distant, lightless moon. Their obliviousness was its own form of cruelty, a constant affirmation that I was not worth noticing. "Yes, stepmother," I murmured, my voice a thread of sound easily lost in the swell of the orchestra. She gave a sharp, satisfied nod and swept away, my father and sisters in her wake, a perfect, glittering constellation moving toward the heart of the ballroom. I retreated to my assigned post, the scent of damp earth and waxy leaves from the enormous potted ferns filling my senses. It was a familiar prison. At every ball, every social gathering, I was placed strategically out of sight, a piece of undesirable furniture artfully concealed. It was a humiliation so routine it had lost its sharp edge, settling into a dull, permanent ache in my chest. From my verdant cage, I could see the entire spectacle. The swirl of vibrant gowns, the flash of jewels, the carefully constructed smiles of the ton. I was a student of a world I could never join, an architect observing a building whose doors were forever sealed to me. My secret passion was architecture. In the dusty solitude of my father's neglected library, I consumed books on form and function, on the mathematical poetry of a well-placed arch and the structural integrity of a flying buttress. I understood the world through the language of foundations and frameworks. I saw my family as a poorly designed edifice, my stepmother the ornate but cracking facade, my father the crumbling foundation, my sisters the pretty, useless gargoyles, and I was the hidden support beam in a forgotten room, bearing a weight no one acknowledged. An hour passed. Then another. The music ebbed and flowed, a tide of sound that washed over me without effect. Dancers spun, champagne flowed, and I remained rooted to my spot, a silent sentinel among the leaves. I watched Celeste blush as a young baron complimented her, and saw Isabella hold court with a circle of admirers. I saw my stepmother, her face a mask of triumph, chatting with the Countess of Ashworth. This was her masterpiece, this perfect social tableau. I was the one flaw she had to hide. Then, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a subtle change at first, a ripple of awareness, a quieting of chatter that spread from the grand entrance inwards. The music did not falter, but the rhythm of the crowd did. Heads turned, fans stilled. A path began to clear through the throng, not with any overt command, but with an instinctual deference. Through that newly formed canyon of silk and velvet walked the Duke of Blackwood. Alistair Blackwood was a man more myth than mortal. He was immensely powerful, impossibly wealthy, and famously reclusive. He had not attended a social event in years, not since the tragic death of his younger brother. Stories swirled around him like the London fog, that he was cruel, that he was scarred, that he was mad with grief. Seeing him here was like seeing a statue step down from its pedestal. He was taller than I had imagined, dressed in severe, immaculate black that seemed to absorb the light around him. His face was all sharp angles and stark planes, his expression unreadable, his eyes a cold, piercing gray that swept over the room with a dismissive air. He looked like a hawk that had found its way into a cage of canaries. My stepmother's eyes widened, a flicker of avaricious hope igniting in their depths. The Duke of Blackwood. Here, the ultimate prize. I saw her hand go to Isabella's arm, a silent command. This was the moment she had engineered her daughter's entire life for. The Duke moved through the room with a slow, deliberate grace, his gaze passing over the hopeful faces and curated smiles without a flicker of interest. He was a force of nature, a glacier moving through a field of flowers, and every eye was on him. He stopped before Lady Anya and my sisters. I was too far away to hear the words, but I could read the scene perfectly. My stepmother's ingratiating smile, Isabella's practiced curtsy, Celeste's wide-eyed awe. The Duke inclined his head, a gesture of politeness so minimal it was almost an insult. His eyes, however, were not on them. They were scanning the room, continuing their sweep, cold and analytical. They passed over the chandeliers, the orchestra, the bowing lords and ladies. And then they stopped. They stopped on me. For a heart-stopping moment, I was certain I was mistaken. He had to be looking at the ferns, or perhaps the tapestry behind me. But his gaze did not waver. It was direct, focused, and unnervingly intent. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I, who had perfected the art of being invisible, was suddenly pinned by the most powerful gaze in the room. It felt like a physical touch, a pressure against my skin. I instinctively shrank back, trying to merge with the shadows of the leaves. He said something to my stepmother, his voice too low to carry. Lady Anya's smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter confusion. She gestured vaguely toward Isabella, then Celeste. The Duke gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He spoke again, his voice clearer this time, not loud, but carrying with an authority that cut through the low hum of the ballroom. "I have seen both your daughters, Lady Valerius," the Duke said. His words fell into a sudden, shocking pocket of silence as those nearest to him strained to hear. "But I want the third." And the music stopped. The violinist's bow stuttered to a halt mid-stroke. The final note of the waltz died in the air, leaving a ringing, absolute silence. Every head in the ballroom turned, first toward the Duke, then toward my stepmother's stunned face, and then, following his unwavering gaze, they turned toward the forgotten corner of the room. Toward the ferns, toward me. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were on me, and it was not a feeling of vindication or triumph. It was raw, terrifying exposure. I felt like a nocturnal creature dragged into the blinding sun. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. My carefully constructed world of invisibility shattered into a million pieces. Lady Anya's face was a mask of disbelief, her perfect smile frozen in a grotesque parody. Isabella's jaw was slack, her beauty momentarily erased by shock. My father, for the first time, looked directly at me, his expression one of complete bewilderment. The Duke of Blackwood took a step, and then another, moving toward me. The crowd parted before him as if by magic. Each footfall on the polished marble floor echoed in the cavernous silence. He did not look at anyone else. His gray eyes were fixed on mine, and as he drew closer, I saw they were not cold, not exactly. They were watchful, perceptive, like he was looking past the gray dress and the frightened posture and seeing something deep inside me. He stopped a few feet away. The scent of winter air and old books clung to him, a strange and compelling combination. "Miss Elara," he said, his voice a low baritone that seemed to vibrate in the very air between us. He knew my name. How could he possibly know my name? I couldn't find my voice. My throat was a desert. I could only manage a small, jerky nod. "I am told you have an appreciation for architecture," he continued, as if we were having a casual conversation in an empty room, instead of being the subject of every stare in London. "The west wing of my city residence was designed by Alastair Finch. I believe you're familiar with his work on the Grand Library?" The question was so specific, so absurdly out of place, that it broke through my panic. Alastair Finch was a genius, a master of light and space, whose work was often overlooked in favor of more ostentatious designers. To hear his name now, from these lips, was a profound shock. His use of cantilevered balconies was revolutionary, I heard myself say, my voice thin and reedy but clear. He understood that a building must not only stand, but breathe. A flicker of something, approval, interest, crossed the Duke's severe features. It was not a smile, but it was a definite shift in the landscape of his face. Indeed, he did. He extended a hand, his black leather glove stark against the air. Perhaps you would allow me to show it to you sometime. It was not a question, it was a statement of intent. Before I could react, before my stepmother could recover from her state of paralysis and intervene, he spoke again, his voice now addressed to the room at large, though his eyes remained on me. Forgive the interruption. Please, continue. As if a spell had been broken, the orchestra conductor nervously tapped his baton, and a new waltz began, hesitant and shaky at first, then gaining confidence. The chatter resumed, but it was different now, fevered, speculative. I was no longer an invisible girl in a gray dress. I was a mystery. The object of the Duke of Blackwood's inexplicable interest. He gave me a final brief nod, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as seamlessly as he had appeared, leaving me standing in the wreckage of my quiet, miserable world. The days that followed were a study in bewilderment. My home, once a place of quiet suppression, was now humming with a tense, confused energy. Lady Anya treated me with a kind of suspicious civility I found more unnerving than her usual disdain. She watched me as if I were a bomb that might detonate at any moment, her questions sharp and probing, trying to unearth the secret of the Duke's interest. "What did you do, Elara? Who did you speak to? There must be some trick." She could not conceive of a world where my value was intrinsic. It had to be the result of some cunning manipulation on my part. My stepsisters were equally perplexed. Celeste looked at me with a new, hesitant respect, while Isabella's envy was a sharp, bitter perfume in the air. "The Duke of Blackwood," she had muttered, pacing her room. "He didn't even look at me. He looked past me as if I were glass." For the first time, she was experiencing a taste of the invisibility that had been my entire diet for years. I found I felt no satisfaction in it, only a strange, hollow pity. An invitation arrived 2 days later. It was delivered by a footman in the Blackwood livery, the cream card thick and embossed with the ducal crest. It was addressed to me, and me alone. An invitation to view the Finch wing of Blackwood House. My stepmother read it over my shoulder, her lips a thin, bloodless line. She could not forbid it. To refuse the Duke would be a social catastrophe. But allowing me to go, to have this private audience, was a surrender of control she could barely stomach. I went. I wore the best dress I owned, a simple dark blue velvet that was years out of fashion, but was at least clean and well mended. I felt a tremor of fear as the carriage pulled up to the imposing stone facade of Blackwood House. It was a fortress, severe and elegant, much like its owner. I was met at the door not by the Duke, but by a stern-faced, gray-haired woman in a housekeeper's uniform. She introduced herself as Mrs. Gable. Her expression was formal, but her eyes held a spark of curiosity. She led me through halls of echoing marble and shadowed portraits to the Duke's library. It was the most beautiful room I had ever seen. 2 stories high, with soaring arched windows and walls lined from floor to ceiling with books. A spiral staircase of wrought iron curled up to a second-level gallery. The air smelled of leather, paper, and beeswax. And there, standing by a large desk, was the Duke. He was not in formal evening wear, but in a simple white shirt and dark trousers. Without the stiff jacket, he seemed younger, less formidable, though no less intense. "Miss Elara," he said, his voice calm, "thank you for coming." "Your Grace," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Thank you for the invitation. This room, it is magnificent." "It is my sanctuary," he said simply. He gestured to a chair by the fire. "Please." I sat, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I was acutely aware of my shabby dress, my unadorned hair. I was a sparrow in a cage of eagles. I braced myself for the real reason I was here. Pity? A cruel joke? A strategic play I couldn't comprehend. "I imagine," he began, taking the seat opposite me, that you are wondering why I sought you out." I nodded, unable to speak. "It was 5 years ago," he said, his gray eyes fixed on my face. "At the exhibition for the proposed new bridge over the Thames. I was there with my brother. It was one of the last outings we had together." A shadow passed over his face, a flicker of old, deep pain. There was a crowd of investors and society figures, all praising the most ornate, ostentatious design, a monstrosity of gilded iron and needless statuary. But there was a young woman standing off to the side, talking quietly to one of the junior architects. She was pointing out a flaw in the design's load-bearing calculations. She spoke of tensile strength and compression, and how the designer had sacrificed structural integrity for aesthetics. She said it was beautiful, but it would not last. She said it was a lie told in stone. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered that day. I had gone with my father, who was a minor investor. I had been mesmerized by the blueprints and had noticed a glaring error the senior architects were ignoring. I had spoken my thoughts aloud to a young draftsman, never imagining anyone else was listening. "That young woman was you," the Duke stated. "I never forgot what you said, a lie told in stone." It was the most astute observation I heard that day, the most honest. He leaned forward slightly. "My brother Leo died a month later when a balcony at a country house collapsed. A new construction, praised for its beauty. A lie told in stone." The pieces clicked into place. The grief, the reclusiveness, the obsession with architecture. It was not a hobby, it was a scar. "I am so sorry for your loss, Your Grace," I whispered, the words feeling horribly inadequate. "I value integrity, Miss Elara," he said, his voice low and intense. "In buildings and in people. It is a quality I find exceedingly rare. At the ball, I saw you standing in the corner, not playing the social games, not wearing a mask. I saw the same honesty I heard in your voice 5 years ago. That is why I sought you out, not for pity, not for sport, but because I wished to speak with a person of substance." I stared at him, my heart aching with a feeling I couldn't name. It was a terrifying, fragile thing. Hope. For my entire life, I had been defined by what I was not. Not beautiful, not charming, not important. He was the first person to see me for what I was. He had not just seen me, he had recognized me. He saw the part of myself I valued most, the part I kept hidden because no one else had ever cared to look for it. He did not show me the Finch wing that day. Instead, we talked. For hours. He asked me about my studies, about my theories on Gothic versus neoclassical design. He listened, truly listened, with an attentiveness that was a balm to my soul. I found my voice, my initial hesitancy melting away under the warmth of his genuine interest. I spoke of my dreams of designing buildings that were both beautiful and true, places of sanctuary and strength. He spoke of his own work, his efforts to fund new construction projects that prioritized safety and longevity over fleeting fashion. It was a meeting of minds so profound, so electrifying, that it left me breathless. When I left Blackwood House that afternoon, Mrs. Gable saw me to the door. The formality in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet warmth. As she handed me my cloak, she said softly, "The Duke has not spoken that much, nor smiled, since Master Leo passed. It is good to see some light return to this house." That was the first of many meetings. Sometimes we would walk in the gardens, discussing the merits of a Palladian facade. Other times, we would sit in his library, poring over old blueprints. He sent me books, rare volumes I had only ever dreamed of reading. He never once complimented my appearance. Instead, he would say, "Your argument about the inefficiency of the Baroque floor plan was brilliant," or, "You have a remarkable clarity of thought, Elara." He called me Elara. The name on his lips sounded different, like a word with weight and meaning. With each meeting, a layer of my armor chipped away. The ingrained belief in my own worthlessness began to crumble. I started to hold my head a little higher. I found myself speaking up at the dinner table at home, much to my stepmother's consternation. I was a plant that had been kept in a dark room, finally being brought into the sun, and I was terrified of how quickly I was beginning to grow. Our relationship was one of quiet, intellectual companionship, but beneath the surface, a current of something deeper was flowing. I felt it in the way his eyes would linger on my face when I was passionately explaining a concept, or in the way he would find small excuses for our hands to brush when passing a book. One cool afternoon, as we stood on a balcony overlooking his gardens, a sudden gust of wind whipped around us. I shivered, and without a word, he took off his own coat and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy and warm, and it smelled of him. His hands rested on my shoulders for a moment longer than necessary, his touch firm and grounding. In that moment, the space between us crackled with an unspoken intimacy that had nothing to do with architecture and everything to do with the man and woman we were. He told me more about his brother Leo, how he had been bright and charming, the opposite of Alistair's own severe nature. He confessed his guilt, a belief that he, as the older brother, should have been more vigilant, should have inspected the house they were visiting himself. "I see his face in every faulty design," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely showed. "Every crack in a facade, every choice made for vanity instead of truth." I placed my hand over his, a gesture of pure instinct. "It was not your fault, Alistair," I said, using his first name for the first time. It felt both scandalous and perfectly natural. He turned his hand over and laced his fingers through mine. His grip was strong, his skin warm. He didn't say anything, but his thumb stroked the back of my hand, a small, repetitive motion that spoke volumes. He was not just a duke, not just a powerful man. He was a man who had suffered, who carried a great wound. And in that moment of shared vulnerability, I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was falling in love with him. My newfound confidence and my frequent visits with the Duke did not go unnoticed. Lady Anya's suspicious civility curdled into a simmering resentment. She could not understand what Alistair saw in me, and her inability to comprehend it made her furious. She had groomed Isabella to be a duchess, and to see the prize claimed by me, the gray, silent girl, was an unbearable insult to her ambition. "He is toying with you," she would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "Men like that, they have their whims. They will amuse themselves with a plain little thing for a while, but they always marry for beauty and connection. He will break your heart, Elara, and you will have made a fool of this family." I tried to ignore her, to hold on to the truth Alistair had shown me, that my worth was not in my face, but in my mind. But years of conditioning are a powerful poison. Her words were like tiny, sharp seeds of doubt planted in the fertile ground of my insecurity. Was she right? Was I just a novelty, a temporary diversion from the beautiful, suitable women of his own class? The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, a constant companion to the burgeoning joy he brought me. The situation came to a head when Lady Anya announced she had accepted a marriage proposal on my behalf. From a Mr. Thorne, a man 3 times my age with a reputation for drink and a failing shipping business. He was a viscount's 4th son with a mortgaged estate and a cruel mouth. The match was an insult, a punishment. "He is willing to overlook your quiet nature," she said, her smile thin and sharp as a razor. "He needs a sensible wife to manage his household. The Duke is not going to propose, you foolish girl. This is the best you can hope for. I have secured your future." "I will not marry him," I said, my voice shaking but firm. It was the first time I had ever openly defied her. Her face hardened, the mask of maternal concern dropping away to reveal the raw, ugly ambition beneath. "You will do as you are told. You are a burden on this house, an unmarriageable weight I have carried for years. I have found a place for you. You will accept it. The wedding will be in a month." She was not securing my future. She was disposing of me. She wanted me married off and gone before Alistair's whim could turn into something more, something that would threaten the prospects of her own daughters. That night, I wept. I wept for the years of cruelty, for the prison my life had become, and for the beautiful, fragile hope that was about to be extinguished. I knew I could not fight her alone. My father would fold, as he always did. I had only one ally, one person who might listen. But asking for his help felt like a betrayal of the very foundation of our relationship. He valued my substance, my integrity. To run to him like a damsel in distress seemed to negate all of that. But the alternative, a life with Mr. Thorne, was a kind of death. The next day, my stepmother escalated her campaign. I overheard her speaking with one of her society friends, her voice carrying from the drawing room. "Poor Elara," she sighed, "a perfect performance of sorrow. Her mind has always been delicate. She has these flights of fancy. She believes the Duke of Blackwood is courting her. It is a sad delusion. We are trying to manage it as gently as possible. She was not just trying to marry me off. She was trying to destroy my credibility, to paint me as a hysterical, lovesick creature, so that when the Duke inevitably discarded me, everyone would nod and say they knew it all along. She was poisoning the well, ensuring that no one would ever believe my side of the story. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. That evening, a letter arrived for the Duke. I saw the footman deliver it. It was penned in my stepmother's elegant, looping script. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, what it contained. Lies. Poison. A carefully crafted narrative of my supposed instability, designed to sever our connection for good. She was not just removing me from the game. She was burning the entire board. I felt a despair so profound it was like drowning. She had won. How could Alistair, a man who valued truth above all else, not be swayed by a letter from my own stepmother warning him of my delicate mind? He would retreat. The kindness would cease. The doors of Blackwood House would close to me forever. And I would be left to face Mr. Thorne alone. I waited for 2 days. 2 days of agonizing silence. No word from the Duke. No more books arrived. No invitations. My stepmother's triumphant smirk was almost unbearable. She had done it. She had snuffed out the one light in my life. The hope that had bloomed in my chest withered and died, leaving behind only the familiar, cold ache of resignation. On the 3rd day, a formal summons arrived, not for me, but for my entire family. My father, Lady Anya, Isabella, Celeste, and myself. We were requested to attend the Duke of Blackwood at his residence that afternoon. There was no explanation, just a simple, undeniable command. Panic seized me. This was it. He was going to end it formally. He would do it in front of my family to make the rejection absolute, to support my stepmother's narrative that I was delusional. The shame was so intense I felt physically ill. Lady Anya, however, was radiant. She believed her plan had worked perfectly. She saw this as the Duke politely extricating himself while maintaining social decorum. She chose her gown with care, a deep burgundy that made her look regal. "See, Elara," she said, her voice smooth as cream. "He is a gentleman. He is letting you down gently. Now you see the wisdom of accepting Mr. Thorne's offer." The carriage ride to Blackwood House was the longest of my life. I sat in silence, my hands clenched in my lap, trying to build a wall around my heart. I would not cry. I would not give her the satisfaction. I would accept this final humiliation with the same stoicism I had practiced for years. We were shown not to the library, but to the grand drawing room. It was an imposing space, with a high coffered ceiling and tall windows that looked out onto the gray London sky. Alistair was not alone. Mrs. Gable stood discreetly by the door, and sitting in a chair near the fireplace was a stern-looking man with a briefcase full of papers, a solicitor. Alistair stood as we entered. He was once again in severe, formal black. His face was carved from granite, his expression impossible to read. He looked at my stepmother, at my father, at my sisters, and then his eyes found mine. They held my gaze for a fraction of a second, and in that brief moment, I saw not pity, not anger, but something else. Something that looked like steel. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice cold and clipped. He gestured to the chairs arranged before his desk. We sat, a tableau of a dysfunctional family awaiting judgment. "I have received some troubling correspondence," he began, picking up a letter from his desk. My stepmother's letter. "It was sent by you, Lady Valerius. In it, you claim that your stepdaughter, Elara, is mentally unwell, that she suffers from delusions regarding my intentions toward her. Lady Anya inclined her head, her face a mask of sorrow. "Your Grace, it is a matter of great pain for our family. We only wish to protect her, and you, from any embarrassment." "I see," the Duke said, his voice dangerously soft. "You wrote this letter out of concern for her well-being." "Of course," she breathed. Alistair placed the letter down. "That is interesting. Because I had my solicitor, Mr. Davies, here do a little research. You see, I find it prudent to investigate claims that question a person's character, especially a person I hold in high esteem." My stepmother's composure flickered. A hint of unease crept into her eyes. "Mr. Davies," the Duke said, "if you would." The solicitor opened his briefcase. "Lady Valerius," he began, his voice dry as dust, "my investigation found that upon her mother's death, Miss Elara was left a trust. Not a large one, but substantial. It was to be managed by her father until she came of age or married. However, upon your marriage to Lord Valerius, you were granted authority over the household finances, including the administration of this trust." My father shifted uncomfortably. I stared at the solicitor, confused. I knew of no trust. "The trust," Mr. Davies continued, "was intended to provide Miss Elara with a comfortable dowry and a degree of independence. However, the funds appear to have been absorbed into general household expenses. Lavish gowns for your daughters, for instance, a new carriage, your gambling debts, my lady." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "In essence, the money is gone. Miss Elara's inheritance has been systematically stolen over the last 10 years. The room was silent. My stepmother's face had gone chalk white. "That is a slanderous lie," she hissed. "I have the bank records right here," Mr. Davies said calmly, tapping a thick stack of papers. "Furthermore, my inquiries into Mr. Thorne, the man you have arranged for Miss Elara to marry, revealed that he is on the verge of bankruptcy. He was offered a significant sum, paid from the last dregs of your husband's estate, to take her off your hands. It seems you were not securing her future, but selling her to cover your tracks and remove the one person who might one day ask questions about her missing inheritance." The beautiful, ornate facade of Lady Anya finally cracked, revealing the ugly rot beneath. Her face contorted with rage. "She is nothing," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "A plain, useless girl. She was a burden. I gave her a roof over her head. She owed us." "She owed you nothing," Alistair said, his voice like the crack of a whip. "You took a child who had lost her mother and you systematically abused her. You diminished her, you isolated her, you stole from her, and when she found a glimmer of happiness, you tried to extinguish it with lies. You did not write to me out of concern for her, you wrote to me out of fear. Fear that someone finally saw her true worth, a worth you have spent a decade trying to deny." He turned his gaze from her to me. The steel was still there, but it was forged in my defense. It was a shield, and behind that shield, I felt a flicker of something I had not felt in years: strength. All the pain, all the humiliation, all the quiet suffering coalesced into a single point of cold, clear anger. He had built the foundation. Now, it was my turn to speak. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice, when it came, was steady. "You are right about one thing, stepmother," I said, looking directly into her eyes. "I was quiet, I was silent, because you taught me that my voice did not matter. You taught me that my very presence was an inconvenience. You tried to make me so small that I would disappear. You almost succeeded. I took a step toward her, but you made a mistake. In all those hours you exiled me to the library. I did more than just hide. I read. I learned. I learned about structure and integrity and truth. I learned that some things are built to last, and some things are hollow facades destined to crumble. You, madam, are a hollow facade, and you are crumbling." I looked at my father, whose face was ashen with shame. "And you," I said, my voice softer, but laced with the bitter pain of a lifetime of neglect. "You let this happen. You stood by in silence while she starved my spirit. Your silence was a prison, and I am finished living in it." Finally, I looked at Isabella and Celeste. Isabella looked horrified, but Celeste was crying, her face streaked with tears of what looked like genuine remorse. "I am not your rival," I told them. "I never was. I just wanted to be your sister." Then I turned my back on them, on all of them, and faced Alistair. I had said my piece. I had claimed my voice. Whatever happened next, I was no longer the invisible girl in the corner. My stepmother let out a strangled sob of fury and defeat. My father finally buried his face in his hands. Celeste whispered my name. "Elara, I'm so sorry." Alistair walked toward me, stopping just before me. His eyes, those piercing gray eyes, were no longer cold. They were filled with a fierce, profound respect. "The law will deal with the matter of the trust," he said, his voice low and for my ears only. "Your father has agreed to make full restitution and to ensure you are never under her authority again. She will be returning to her family in the country, in disgrace." He had not just defended me, he had liberated me. He had not slain a dragon for me, but had handed me the sword and trusted I would know how to use it. "Come," he said softly, offering me his arm. "Let us leave them to their ruins." I took his arm, and together we walked out of the drawing room, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind. He led me not to the library, but up the grand staircase and out onto a windswept stone balcony that overlooked the city. The cool air was a balm on my heated skin. We stood in silence for a long time, the sounds of London a distant murmur below. The gray sky seemed vast and full of promise. Finally, he turned to face me. He took both of my hands in his. "Elara," he began, his voice laced with an emotion that made my heart ache. "What I said in that room was the truth. I value integrity above all else. I saw it in you 5 years ago, and I see it in you now. It is the core of who you are. It is strong and true and beautiful." He paused, and his grip on my hands tightened. "I have spent years surrounded by facades, by people who say what they think I want to hear. My life has been a silent, lonely place. And then you filled it with conversation. You filled it with ideas. You filled it with light." My breath hitched. Tears I had refused to shed in front of my family now pricked at my eyes. "I am not a man for poetic speeches," he continued, his voice growing rougher, more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. "But I know this. I do not want to return to that silence. I want to spend the rest of my days listening to you talk about architecture, or history, or anything else you wish. I want to build a life with you, Elara, a life based on truth and mutual respect, a life where you are never invisible again." He released one of my hands and gently brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "I am not rescuing you. You are more than capable of rescuing yourself. I am asking you to be my partner. I am asking you to be my wife." The words I had never dared to dream of, spoken with such earnest, profound sincerity. It was not a grand societal proposal. It was a meeting of two souls who had found in each other a matching integrity. It was everything. "Yes," I breathed, the word a release of all the pain and loneliness I had ever carried. "Yes, Alistair." A slow smile spread across his face, a true brilliant smile that transformed his severe features and reached his eyes, filling them with a light that rivaled the sun. It was the most beautiful structure I had ever seen. He lowered his head and kissed me. It was not a hesitant, tentative kiss. It was deep and certain, a confirmation and a promise. It was the end of a very long, very cold winter and the beginning of everything else. It tasted of relief and of home. 1 year later, I stood on this same balcony, but I was not a guest. I was the Duchess of Blackwood. Alistair's arm was wrapped securely around my waist, his chin resting on the top of my head. Below us, in the gardens, the final touches were being put on the new conservatory I had designed. My first official project. It was a structure of glass and steel, designed to let in the maximum amount of light. It was honest and strong and full of life. My father had visited a few times. He was a changed man, quieter, more thoughtful. He was trying, in his own way, to atone. Our relationship was healing, slowly, like a bone that had been badly broken. Celeste wrote to me every week, and we were rebuilding our sisterhood on a new foundation of honesty. I had not seen or heard from Lady Anya since that day, and Isabella had married a wealthy merchant and moved north. They were figures from a past that felt more like a book I had read than a life I had lived. In the corner of Alistair's library, my library now, sat a small framed sketch. It was the drawing I had made that day at the bridge exhibition 5 years ago, with my notes on the flawed load-bearing calculations scrawled in the margins. Alistair had tracked down the young draftsman and purchased it from him. He'd had it framed for me as a wedding gift. A reminder, he had said, that your voice was always worth hearing, even when you were whispering. Alistair pressed a soft kiss to my hair, his touch familiar and comforting. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. I leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my back. "I was thinking about foundations," I said, my voice soft, "and how you can't build a life or a building or a love on a lie. It has to be built on what is real." He tightened his arm around me. "And what is real, my love?" I smiled, turning my head to look up at his face, at the gray eyes that had seen me when no one else had. The eyes that were now filled with a warmth and love that was my constant sanctuary. "This," I whispered, "this is real." And in the quiet peace of our shared life, I knew I was finally, completely, and irrevocably